I'll begin. Well, I hope I'll begin.
כל עוד בלבב ונימה נפש יהודי הומייה לפתל מזרח קדימה עין לציון סופיה עולה בארצנו ארץ ציון ירושלים להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון
Well, good evening and welcome to the regular third Wednesday Vesper service of the UU Multiracial Unity Action Council. We embrace all who come with a spirit of worship and invite you to remain after the service for conversation. I'm Jack Reich. We begin with the lighting of our chalice, which Richard Trudeau will do. Let this light symbolize for us the brightness of the truths that guide us. And if it were Shabbat in the synagogue, we would have something like this.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
So,
Time for me, Jack?
and now some announcements. Matthew?
Well, let me go first. Here's our service tonight.
Okay.
Our next service, third Wednesday in January, January 21st. The talk is titled The Improbability of Us by Evan Haddingham. Is that how you say his name, Matthew? And Matthew has some information about this service. Matthew? I don't hear Matthew, and I do hear music.
Matthew is muted.
Sorry, let's try this again. Sorry. Okay, but the music, can we kill the music? Thank you.
Yeah.
Evan Haddingham is a science journalist, author, producer, and was senior science editor of the PBS program Nova for over 3 decades. Yes, and in this service, which is the improbability of us, we'll go on a journey through cosmology, climate catastrophes, and human evolution to see how at any point humanity could easily have not survived. Evan will present excerpts from scientists, philosophers, poets, and even the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and suggest that we look at the fragility of humanity's past and present, not as a source of fear or gloom, but with wonder and gratitude. So I hope you'll join us next month. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Matthew.
We envision our congregations, associations, and communities as not being color blind, but color appreciative, as judging and treating people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, their cultural heritage, or other identity, and as treasuring diversity in the context of MLK's beloved community. We call this vision multiracial unity. This is our goal, the unity of the light and dark-skinned people of the world. And while I'm here, I want to mention we've recently published 2 books, one called Toward Multiracial Unity, Fighting Neo-Racism in Unitarian Universalism. This is selected articles from the first 7 years of our journal, The Arrow. And then more recently, another book by our founder, Reverend Dr. Finley Campbell, called simply Neo-Racism.
Are there any more announcements? For the reading tonight, I have what we might call a watching rather than a reading, after which we will have 1 minute of silent meditation. Carmine Gallo, senior contributor to Forbes magazine, writes that John F. Kennedy admired Churchill and carefully studied his rhetoric. Kennedy was said to have been mesmerized by Churchill's speeches. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "A good leader inspires people to have confidence in their leader. A great leader inspires people to have confidence in themselves." This is a good reminder that leaders must be careful with their words. Words can hurt or heal. Words can inflame hatred or raise spirits. Used wisely, words can unleash the best in others. Here are some words from the renowned social scientist, Riane Eisler.
Einstein said it, you cannot have some fun and structuring economics.
I'm sorry, I goofed. I forgot to share screen first, so let me do that. Oh, so many buttons to push. Now you should get it.
The first, changing the conversation.
about economics. Einstein said it, you cannot solve problems with the same thinking that created them. Yeah.
Dessert connects people with themselves, and dessert connects people with memory. I think of memories as like joy trails. It's a trail that reminds me like how far I've come and who I am.
I'm sorry, the downside of
So
YouTube.
we really need something different. We need economic systems that recognize something that once articulated may sound perfectly self-evident, which is that the real wealth of our nation, the real wealth of the world, is not financial. And we certainly saw that, didn't we, with the meltdown of all of those derivatives, all of those credit swaps into thin air, right? The real wealth of our nation, of the world, consists of the contributions of people and of nature. So we need what we have not had, economic systems that give visibility and real value to the most essential human work, the work of caring for people and caring for our Mother Earth.
And now 1 minute silent meditation, please. Just relax, breathe deeply, center yourself. And now a musical interlude.
Now, just putting caring and
في حزن وسع المدى في وجع جوا عميق لا صوت باقي ولا صدى ولا بين بكف الطريق
قلبي يستعب אני עכשיו מחכה לשווא אולי ביתי נופל שוב בערפל אפור הוא ואפל ואת הלכת בחוץ שלכת
يا رفقتي اللي انتو بإيدكم خلنا قبال ما نسيت اعذروني لما نسيتوا معكن أنا ما قدرت أفيد
זה היום, הן לא אשכח אותך.
That's the Jerusalem Youth Choir, a choir of Palestinian and Israeli youngsters. Could you tell as you watched which ones were Palestinians and which ones were Israelis? Well, our speaker this evening is my sister, Deb Reich. Born in Manhattan and raised in Westchester County, New York, she attended public schools in Mamaroneck and Larchmont and earned a BA in English and Writing with honors from Barnard College. She spent a gap year in Israel in 1966 to 67, seeking her Jewish roots. Instead, she discovered an alternate universe with competing narratives and realities, Palestinian and Jewish. By 1981, she had relocated to Israel-Palestine with the intention of working toward intercommunal reconciliation, eventually living not only in Tel Aviv and other Jewish towns, but also for several years in Muslim Arab Palestinian communities on the coast and near Jerusalem. Her title this evening is Transcending the Power of Words That Bind Us. Of this, she says, particular highly laden words inspire but also restrict us, individually and collectively. A golden calf quality acquired by some words, Zionism, democracy, homeland, resistance, liberation, can over generations lead us far afield of where we've meant to go, sometimes 180 degrees in the opposite direction. Can we somehow help one another to escape the limiting power of sacred terminology in favor of a more compassionate here and now for us all? Deb Reich.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I thought that was a really nice series of preludes. Things like the youth choir in Jerusalem are still going on today, believe it or not. There are programs that bring Jewish and Palestinian, Israeli and Palestinian kids together to play tennis, to sing, to play instruments, and so on. So, yeah. So warmest greetings to everybody. I'm going to kind of half read this because I figured at 3 a.m. I shouldn't trust myself to stay on topic without a little help from a script. So now it's closer to 4, but I'm hanging in there. Okay. I am very honored to be speaking to your people from your community of activists seeking a world without racism. The world is too much with us these days, on screens and off. The endless distractions, the buzz, make it hard to focus. Be still, breathe, listen, relax, feel safe and calm. This Zoom time is an opportunity to be in a calmer space together. So I think it's good that we meditated and that we're listening together and breathing together. So my book from about 15 years ago called No More Enemies is about the theme that the notion of enemies is a social construct that has long since become obsolete and should be discarded. It was a collection of ideas that I'd been thinking about for a long time. I maybe should insert here that since I came to Israel, I pretty much made my living writing, editing, and translating, mostly, but not exclusively, for like social justice nonprofits and that kind of thing. So I've gotten to know a lot of people who were involved in, peace and reconciliation work. Enemies is a word loaded with an excess of yang energy in a yanged out world. People too often cherish the idea of enemies. Some cannot imagine a life without enemies. Well, it's past time to reboot. 60 odd years ago in his book, I wasn't sure how many people in the audience here would get, in the congregation or the gathering, would get some of my references, but I see that most of us are boomers, so everybody's going to know what I know. 60 odd years ago in his book, The Turning Point, Fritjof Capra wrote that we were at an inflection point. We needed to work toward restoring balance to our world with an infusion of yin energy, including the energy of women in leadership roles across the board. I hope the new agentic AI and the large language models and all that stuff, I hope all of that is taking Capra's suggestion into account. If we don't get a turning point toward the leadership of women, we may all be doomed. So let's hope AI is being coached in the right direction. Okay, enslavement to words. I said I would talk about how we allow ourselves to be enslaved to certain words and how to transcend that. Maybe indentured is a better word, but you get the idea. Zionism is a powerful example to me because I was raised to understand it as something very positive. Naturally, it was a shock when I first got to Israel in 1966 on a gap year and met Palestinians for whom Zionism signified the root cause of all their suffering. Later, I would be shocked again when I read more about the history of Jewish support for the Zionist movement after its founding in the 1890s. Jewish support for Zionism, which most of you probably know, oscillated wildly over subsequent decades among liberal and other Jewish communities in the West, not because they worried that it might hurt Arabs, but because they thought it might hurt Jews to be seen as having loyalty to another country alongside or ahead of loyalty to their country of residence and citizenship. So I have a nice story for you about the dilemmas of Zionism for Palestinians in our time. My old friend Sam Bahur in Al-Bireh in the West Bank. Al-Bireh is kind of the Scarsdale next to Ramallah of the West Bank. And that's where his folks are from. He's a hyphenated Palestinian American raised in Youngstown, Ohio. But the home that he and his wife are living in Ramallah was his dad's and his grandfather's before him. Anyway, he asked me, bless you, he asked me for advice several years ago. A group of prominent Ramallah residents were establishing a Ramallah Foundation, modeled, he said, seriously now, on Teddy Kollek's fabulously successful Jerusalem Foundation, which had brought untold millions in donor funding and civic improvements to Jewish Jerusalem for decades. How many people knew there was such a thing as the Jerusalem Foundation under Teddy Kollek? Raise your hand. No. Okay. It was very famous for decades. Teddy Kollek, a former mayor of Jerusalem, longtime mayor, and one of the kind of founding generation of the Ashkenazi Israel. Sam's colleagues were discussing whether the new Ramallah Foundation charter should allow or should forbid cooperation with parallel Zionist organizations in Israel or beyond. He told me. Non-cooperation with Zionist organizations was pretty much taken for granted by Palestinians at the time. So I thought about it. And this is what I said. I said, listen, Sam, imagine you are a Catholic and believe devoutly in Jesus. And then one day some archaeologists come along and say they've published a study purporting to prove that Jesus was a pedophile. Devout Catholics will not stop believing in the divinity of Jesus on that account. They will tell you that archaeology and old tombs and artifacts have nothing to do with it, and they will be right. Religion, arguably, is faith-based, not fact-based. Meantime, many Jews in Israel and the West, I told him, grew up in homes where Zionism was almost like a religion, and so they find themselves incapable of renouncing it. Some very good people in Israel working for equality for Palestinians, I said, still consider themselves to be Zionists. Someone like Gershon Baskin, say. Anybody know that name? Gershon Baskin negotiated on back channels the release of Gilad Shalit when he was captive with Hamas in Gaza, and he's been very, very active in all of the back channel negotiations leading up to the so-called Trump, 20-point plan and so on. Anyway, he's dedicated his life to equality and justice for Palestinians and Israelis. So he's still, for a long time, not anymore, but for a long time, still thought of himself as a Zionist. So I said to Sam, do you really not want to work with folks like that? When I remembered to ask him much later what they had decided about the charter, he said, we decided to table the issue and it hasn't been brought up again since. Okay, they just put it away. Well, things change over time. Gershon Baskin declared himself a post-Zionist some time ago. Even Peter Beinart, does that name resound? Peter Beinart, liberal American Jewish author, writes for now Jewish Currents, and before that, I forget, The Nation, The Atlantic, something. Anyway, uh, renounced Zionism a few years ago. In fact, quite a few prominent Jews in the U.S. and Israel have publicly renounced Zionism lately because of their conviction that while formally conceived with the noble aim of national self-determination for Jews in their ancestral homeland, Zionism is intrinsically a project that oppresses another people and cannot avoid denying Palestinians their legitimate rights, even in the best case scenario, which of course is not what we have going on here these days. While numerous Israeli intellectuals have publicly renounced Zionism over the years, their efforts did not achieve widespread traction because Israelis had become too wedded to the idea of Zionism as a sacred cow, or maybe a golden calf, or whatever, a word and an idea to which we were enslaved or indentured. Another word that has bedeviled Israelis and Palestinians trying to make common cause is the notion of normalization, or I should say anti-normalization. How many people have heard that? Anybody? No. So this is a very big topic in activism on behalf of Palestinians, okay? At some point decades ago, Palestinian activist movements began to despair that ordinary moderate Israelis would ever truly embrace full equality and give up the preferred status of being Jews in the Jewish state. So-called coexistence programs were deemed hypocritical and in some cases with some justification. The problem was that deciding to oppose pretty much any sort of cooperation between Palestinian civil society and Israeli civil society in the pursuit of justice created a terrible impediment to nurturing a genuine joint effort by equals. Anti-normalization did not make center-left Israeli Jews relinquish Zionism en masse, but it did asphyxiate dozens of programs for young people and other groups who were genuinely attempting to explore together and support joint solutions to the conflict. And meanwhile, the armed struggle, as it is fondly called by its opponents, has not resolved the situation either. Instead, it brought us one war after another, and finally October 7th, and Gaza in ruins, and tens of thousands killed, and hundreds of thousands wounded, widowed, and orphaned. Call it genocide, or don't call it genocide. I will not be enslaved to that word either way. The last 2 years in Gaza are an unfathomable, indefensible, monstrous, man-made disaster. And the systematic terrorizing of West Bank Palestinians is rapidly escalating. I should say, I don't have it in the text, but there's also a lot of money being made off of all of this. All these American firms are rushing now to try to get pieces of reconstruction. The bulldozers, D9 bulldozers, and those kinds of things were purchased in large quantities. There were people not even in the army going around freelancing essentially with a wink from captains and commanders of units and so on, just bulldozing, just trying to raise as much of Gaza as they could raise. while the conflict was going on, the hot conflict was going on. So there's also a profit motive here. Many phrases beloved of activists, extremists or otherwise, have succeeded mainly in striking fear into the hearts of those in the other camp. That would include slogans like, I mean, in my opinion, slogans like from the river to the sea and globalize the intifada. And on the other side, the ominous statement, quote, there are no innocents in Gaza, unquote, which you will hear widely spoken in Israel today because of October 7th and its trauma. It's not the struggle for equality and commitment to resistance or to self-defense I take issue with. It's wielding words as blunt instruments that fail to achieve their stated aims and thoroughly alienate valuable potential allies in the process. And I think it was Robert, before we began the whole thing, was talking about lying to ourselves or something, looking away, remember, an hour ago? And it's interesting because I have a section here called gaslighting ourselves. There seems to be a general tendency to ideological rigidity on both the far right and the far left, which none of us has failed to notice, I'm sure. That kind of stance is mostly toxic to the quest for social justice. The sacralizing of social or political dogma can lead us in very unprofitable directions. Sometimes it seems to be the equivalent of gaslighting ourselves. We can't face what's really happening and the ways we are contributing to it, so we collude with ourselves to not see it clearly. I'm not sure what the remedy is. And I'm sure psychology and psychiatry have other names for the same things, but I thought gaslighting ourselves was very evocative. Okay. I saw an internet meme a few months ago that spoke to me very powerfully. It said, when there is a child on one side and a gun on the other, always side with the child. So some words are easier to align with than others. Many Israelis I know can clearly see the humanity of Gazans, and other Israelis I know cannot see the humanity of Gazans. These folks are not different from each other in their degree of humaneness, however selective, and their genuine desire to do right in the world. Rather, they differ in the stories they have been exposed to at first hand, the life experiences they have had, the way they have interpreted the losses and tragedies they have endured. I don't know what the answer is for that either. Starting from zero as an American Jewish kid in suburban New York in the 1950s and 60s, I have been fortunate in my progress at learning to appreciate all things Arab and Arabic. My relationship to the language, for example, underwent a gradual metamorphosis. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, when I was turning 18, I was working on a kibbutz very close to the Israeli-Jordanian-Syrian border alongside the Golan Heights. Foreign Arab radio stations were broadcasting threatening war propaganda in heavily Arabic accented Hebrew. I remember all the kibbutz teenagers laughing at it, but it was still scary. And it was engraved on my, I don't know, hypothalamus or whatever these kinds of things are engraved on, near the brainstem. I remember it. I can hear it to this day. Anu na'ale al-Abim. Anu na'ale al-Haifa. This is, we will overwhelm Haifa. We will overwhelm Tel Aviv in Arabic accented Hebrew. And then at college, a few years later, I studied a year of classical Arabic and began to appreciate its vast and incomparable beauty. Eventually, in the early 1980s, when I lived in Kufr Kara, a Muslim Arab village in north central Israel, with a grassroots community cooperation program called Interns for Peace, I became something of an Arabic speaker myself for a while. The rented apartment I shared with the other women volunteers was upstairs from the landlord's family on the ground floor. Every morning I would wake to the sounds of village family life, a rooster crowing, sounds of the neighbors starting their day, the youngsters downstairs running around the yard laughing and shouting, and their mom calling them in for breakfast, obviously in Arabic. Get your butts in here on the double or you're going to be late for school. The language and the community where it was spoken and the people speaking it became deeply and irrevocably humanized for me, one day at a time. I believe that that is the best way that painful conflicts can truly be healed, and a world of peace and justice without racism, without enemies, come into being. Up close, in person, learning to live a life of equals, one day at a time. We humans might even find a way to engineer opportunities for that sort of positive experience for masses of people on purpose, if only we devoted a lot more resources to that. That, I think, is where our resources should be invested, instead of in the manufacture of arms, the promotion of crypto, the rehabilitation of fossil fuel extraction, the trafficking of men, women, and children for pleasure and profit, and the many lethal varieties of zero-sum politics. Thank you. I'm here for questions. You're muted, Jack. You're muted. There you go.
We'll do, thanks.
Now,
We'll do questions during discussion. Richard, how about the offertory?
Okay. We, of course, don't pass the plate, but we do remind people that the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council, which some of us pronounce UMIAC, we have a website. We're a membership organization. Membership is $30 a year. You get to write it off on your taxes. Our goal, we think, is noble, important. It's the mountaintop, the unity of the light and dark-skinned people of the world.
Our service is ending. As we extinguish the chalice, symbol of our religious faith, we recall the words of the late Reverend Elizabeth Sully Jones. Now we extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. After closing music, the floor will be open for discussion. Okay. Nope, that's not it.
Congress has just given you a huge gift to taxes. There's this new $6,000 senior deduction, there's a $40,000 SALT exemption, and just several little things that sound really good. I already know this is really going to have a lot to do, especially when you're considering doing all it's going to happen. It's going to turn this thing so good, this deduction thing you get. Perhaps bypass $300,000 in additional tax savings they can do.
That was the Jewish Men's Choir of San Diego. Shalom Chaverim Lehitraot. Goodbye, friends, till we meet again. That's the song with which the Unitarian Universalist Society of Spokane closes every worship service. And Hivenu Shalom Aleichem, may peace be brought upon us. And that ends our service. It's now time for open conversation. Just raise your hand if you wish to be called upon. Bobby, you're up first.
That was beautiful, Deb. Thank you so much. And I especially enjoyed the stories about the Israeli and Palestinian youth participating together in various things. But I think what I've been thinking about the last few days that we gaslight ourselves with here is the notion of democracy that we happen to be talking about at our women's group on Sunday. By chance, I also had been thinking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, since it had been Human Rights Day earlier that week, but of course it wasn't celebrated in the US. So we have a witnessing every week. We go out with a banner that says, "Faithful Defiance of Authoritarianism." You may be familiar with that action of immediate witness that came out of General Assembly last year. And we distribute literature on all kinds of issues. And on Sunday, we were distributing the summary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I decided in the discussion we were having about democracy that democracy would only make sense when we reached the point where everyone had all of those rights identified in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Then democracy makes sense. But as long as we have the inequality that exists now, in my opinion, it does not.
Thank you, Bobby. David? Unmute yourself, please. What happened to David?
Well, he's here, but he still has not unmuted himself.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Deb, you're titled there, Transcending the Power of Words That Bind Us. I spent many years counseling combat veterans. So, in wartime, you have an enemy. And one of the things that we would talk about, because they would be so stuck on readjusting to civilian life, they'd be angry at Nixon, they'd be angry at Ho Chi Minh, they'd be angry at these people that are already dead. Why are you angry at dead people? But I would use that quote that you would hear from, I think, all the way back to World War I or World War II by a politician. The first casualty of war is truth. And so people are trying to push their narratives, and in veterans doing readjustment, they have to search for what actually happened versus what they were told at the time preparing to go to war while they were in war, because oftentimes it's not what people say, it's why they say it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Alan?
And I wanted to tag on to what Bobby said, and I've been thinking about that a lot, about the issue of human rights and democracy. And for a long time we were saying housing is a human right, but then when you talk to somebody that's living in an encampment and the mayor has just swept that encampment, so now they don't even have a tent anymore and they don't have their heater anymore, what kind of rights do they really have? What kind of rights did I live just a block away from a notorious ICE raid site that made international news. It was at 75th and South Shore Drive. I'm blocked south of that. I was woken up by a flashbang grenade at 1 o'clock in the morning. I went out to see what was going on, standing in the middle of the street for a while, and I saw at a distance what was going on. I saw babies in diapers only ripped away from their parents, and couples separated and put in zip ties and put in different trucks and CTA buses and so forth. And so I was thinking, I knew that a lot of those folks were here under temporary protected status and or were seeking asylum. So they were actually here legally. And there were also African-American citizens living in that building, and they also were forced to vacate and were sitting in a row lined up with zip ties on the ground. And so I was kind of thinking, I've gone to a lot of Migra Watch trainings. The folks from Hispanic community and allies are, blowing whistles when you see a nice guy come, and you're trying to yell out people's rights so they know their rights, but they don't have any rights when a flashbang grenade goes off at 1 a.m. and, you have somebody kicking in your door. You can't say, oh, you can't come in here. I mean, so, I just, I'm really now kind of believing, first of all, I've always believed we don't have any rights unless we fight for them, right? So, if you don't know your rights and you don't fight for them, you don't have any. But this takes it to another step, I think, where we are with our country right now. And I imagine there's probably some parallels with this for people in Israel and Palestine, that you don't have any rights if a bomb is dropped on your head. You don't have any rights if you're arrested and there's no due process and nobody's going to enforce it. So yeah, I just wanted to tag onto that. We don't have a democracy when we don't have rights.
That was Ann Holcomb, who's going to be doing a sermon for us in the spring.
July.
June.
Okay, it is June, right before July 4th.
Yeah, so be sure to.
And I'm sure that might be part of it.
Are there more, or are we talked out?
This is Alan. I guess I just want to add a comment. Thank you, Deb, for your commitment to trying to build relationships and understanding across cultural and religious and other barriers. I'm one who believes that we as humans we've been blessed with the gift of the creative spirit, and that and the ability to use that to help build a better community. And of course, a lot of people don't use their creative abilities constructively. But for those of us who try to use them to build a more beloved community, we do all what we can. We don't always succeed. We don't always, get to the end goal. But as long as we're trying, we are, doing, if you want, I don't know if somebody wants to call it God's work or the creation's work, the work of trying to build a better society. I think, then that's all we can say. We just, do the best we can and try to build that better love community. Enough said.
Thank you, Alan. Judith.
Well, thank you, Deb, for your talk, and Jack, thank you for the wonderful music. It seems to me that humans have always had problems with building community. And in a sense, having a community is a strength. I'm going back thinking about early days of humanity, probably even back to primates. Survival depends on having a community. And in a sense, having a community seems to imply that there are others who are not in your community, and they are your enemies, and you have to struggle against them. They are the other. And in some ways, I think this worked out for the human race, for survival, but I don't think, it's been a very long time, probably millennia, that we can't do this anymore, that the harms of it have become so great as our military abilities and propaganda abilities and all of those have increased, that it's just come to a point where it's so destructive to the world that I think somehow we just have to do better. That's where we are. Maybe every time tends to see itself as poised on the brink of disaster, but that's certainly what I'm feeling now. And I have a question for Deb. I've heard of a survey that was taken in Israel, and I don't know the source of the survey. And it turned out in the survey that about 30% of Israeli Jews wanted to leave the country, and about 40% of Israeli Arabs wanted to leave the country. And I wonder what your feeling is about that.
Well, I don't think that's a very surprising set of numbers, given what's going on here. I don't know how that matches up with the percentage of the population that actually has a second passport, where they have automatic residence in some other country. A lot of Israelis would like to get out, but they have can't get jobs anywhere or residency anywhere. You need either money or, to put, the countries that let you come if you bring X tens of thousands of dollars and start a business or whatever. I mean, so I know because young people tell me. I find out because they're sprucing up their CV and they ask me for help sometimes in English. And they're trying to get out of the country and they're still here because they can't find anywhere to run, to relocate to. It's never been an easy place to live here, but I think what's really preying on people now is the sense that it just keeps getting worse all the time and there's no solution in sight, you know. If you want to look at surveys like that, any kind of thing like that, there are probably two good sources. One would be the New Israel Fund, where you can find information on just about anything. It's called the New Israel Fund, and it has an American arm. And the other would be, for example, the Accord Center. It's not spelled ACCORD like accord, as in fellow feeling, but it's spelled small a, capital CHORD, like a chord of music. The Accord Center is a research and advocacy nonprofit whose mission is social psychology for social change, social psychology research for social change. And they do they have a website and they do a lot of these studies about what's going on, both focus groups and mass surveys about what's going on in the country. So that's a good place to look online. The Accord Center, they publish a lot of stuff. I also wanted to say, maybe before the next person, that if anybody is interested in some of these stories I've been telling, there's a book. Can you see this? Kingdom of Olives and Ash. It's stories by mostly American, I think, authors and poets who wrote about, who interviewed and wrote about Israelis and Palestinians. And the editors are Michael Chabon and Ayelet Waldman. Michael Chabon wrote The Yiddish Policemen's Union, which was a big hit a bunch of years ago. And as you can see, it's a pretty substantial book. I got interested in it because my friend Sam was interviewed by Michael Chabon, and there's a chapter in here called A Giant in a Cage, which is about being the kind of personality he is, somewhat larger than life, and being so stifled in the West Bank. Then, if you're interested in the stories of Gazans, I was given as a gift a copy of this book, Daybreak in Gaza, Stories of Palestinian Lives and Culture. The Kingdom of Olives and Ash is Harper Collins, and you can get it online. The Daybreak in Gaza: Stories of Palestinian Lives and Culture, edited by Mahmoud Muna and Matthew Tiller, is from a publisher called Saki, capital S, capital A, capital Q, capital I, Saki Books in London. But I'm sure that's also online. So, there's an awful lot of good stuff to read, where you escape the trap of having somebody like me tell you about Palestinians, and you read their own stuff. So, okay, I just thought, oh, and anybody who's interested, this is what my book looks like. No More Enemies. And it looks like it's really long and hard work, but it has a lot of white space. I modeled it on a book called Kitchen Table Wisdom. If anybody's heard of that book, an American physician wrote that book, and she had these little short chapters that I gauged were could be read in the time it takes to boil spaghetti for your kids. Okay. And I thought that's perfect. That's what I want. I want a book that people can just dip in and read a little chapter and then go back to the other urgent things they have to do. So, yeah.
I'm looking for hands. Ellen LaRue?
Okay. Deb, thank you so much for that. I guess it was a sermon or whatever it was. It was really, it's very touching. And I've been thinking about this kind of thing for a while. We've had troubles in our country with both the far left and the far right using words that people grab onto, and it's very pernicious. And I consider myself a leftist, and I have noticed that if although some of the phrases that are thrown about seem useful at first, if you're not careful, it puts you it leads you down a path that you really don't want to go on. So I think we just always have to be kind of watching ourselves, and sort of inspecting the wisdom of the words that we're following with. And it's, you need words to follow, because otherwise, if you have to do everything from first principles, and it's like you get, it's, what should we say? It's just too hard. So you need kind of rules of thumb and guiding words, but you have to be careful. And I noticed this in my own life, and part of the problem is if you decide that certain words that seem to be very popular amongst your group, and if you start saying that, oh, I don't know, maybe that's a little bit not right, your friends get mad at you. So, but I think we have to do it. We have to kind of just be really always watching and aware of that, making sure that we're not following false idols, I guess you might say. So, but anyway, something we all have to do. So I don't know what else to say, but thanks. Thank you for, I don't know if you stayed up or got up early, but we appreciate it.
Eric?
Yes, thanks. Hi, Deb. Great talk. Yeah, I also was fascinated by this idea of words about shibboleth words or like sacred cow words. Yeah, and Zionism is one of those big words. That's a big word in the United States now too, and around the world. Which I think what Zionism usually means to all these words mean different things to different people too. I think it generally means, the idea that Jews are going to have a country and it's going to be a Jewish majority. I think that's what Zionism usually means. And on the subject, I wonder about we in the United States and a lot of other countries around the world that are hoping for, some kind of settlement around Israel. We love to talk about two-state solutions. Um, my sense, Deb, I'd like to get your input since you're there and you've been there a while and you know Palestinians and you know a lot of Israelis. My sense is that support for two-state solutions very popular outside of, the Middle East, inside of Israel and Palestine and especially Gaza. It's not it's not a thing. It's not if it's 1%, it's not much more than that, and you're not going to get a ruling majority around that or a consensus around that. Is that do I have that about right, Deb?
Well, there isn't any trust, and now, of course, it's much worse than it was 2 years ago. Um, and the statistics are surprising. I've read some statistics that because of this clearly um, unsustainable, curve we're on here, that people, including young people, are beginning to realize that we're going to have to take a risk and try something that hasn't been tried before. Increasingly you'll read op-eds by people who say, look, there are two peoples living in the land between the river and the sea, and neither one of them is going anywhere. So, we're going to have to accept that that's our reality. It's 7 million Palestinians, give or take, and 7 million Israeli Jews, counting. Well, I don't know if that figure counts Palestinians in Israel in which group, but I mean, there's 7 million Arabs and 7 million Jews in this general area. So people are getting, I guess, a sense of the realism of it. They may not be able to figure out how it could be done, you know, but something different has to be tried because we can't keep on doing the same thing over and over. It's become it's beyond, science fiction of destroyed planets and stuff, what's going on here. By the way, I read up all the time on what's going on in the States. I get commentators like Joyce Vance, on the legal issues, and I don't know,
We
Tom
seem like
Hartman.
science fiction too sometimes.
Yeah, look, they're very similar. Sometimes I think, if we picture it as this, we have our cosmos or our planet, and then we have this giant historical pendulum, that goes back and forth. I mean, what's going on in the States with MAGA, the rejection of science, the regime trying to become permanent, all the things that are happening there are happening in another dozen countries around the world that you could all name easily. And very similar things, dynamics are happening in Israel, where the Netanyahu government only took power and sustained it, retained power by making common cause with the far right, the Jewish far right in Israel, the Kahanist, successors, who 20 years ago were outlawed from even going to the Knesset, including by Likud. They were beyond the fringe. They were beyond the pale. And now they're essentially, they're the tail wagging the dog of Netanyahu's government, and he can't get rid of them without losing his without having to call elections, which he doesn't want to do. So, and his folks, we have our own Project 2025, and we have our own Russ Vought here. We have our own Stephen Miller, who are trying to eviscerate the judiciary and put all the power of judicial appointments and oversight, which has been very strong here traditionally, to put all the power of naming and organizing that in the hands of the government, the regime, the administration, and not on a bipartisan basis. And it's been going on for a long time now. It was interrupted by October 7th, but as soon as things calmed down a little bit, they went back to trying it again. They're still doing it, and I mean, clearly, I can't remember who it was who was talking about democracy, that we never really had one because of all the rights that people haven't got. And it's the same thing here. Technically, you can't have a state that's Jewish and democratic, which is the slogan of the liberal Jewish left here, Jewish and democratic. Well, that would be like saying the people who want America to be a Christian country can have Christian and a democracy. Well, it's been done sort of in other places like Britain, but it's very hard to do if you have an established religion. So anyway, I'm going on too long. What was the question, Eric?
Yeah, I think that's about right. That's interesting. So
About the two-state solution.
I think I heard you say they don't necessarily endorse a two-state solution, but majorities. I don't know about Gazans, but like some like Palestinians and Israelis want they're open to radical solutions because of they want change.
And the thing that's missing here is really strong. We need a bunch of Zohran Mamdanis, okay? I know a lot of my Jewish friends and relatives in the States are afraid of Zohran Mamdani because he says things like globalize the Intifada. And I say, first ask him what he means before you go cowering in the corner. This is a guy who brings real social democratic, energy and says, let's deal with the basic issues in a fair way and enable us to have a livable community, a livable city, a livable environment, affordable, and so on. And we need young leadership here that will say, stop quibbling over a confederation, a federation, two states, one state with parallel sovereignty. I have an essay from 2002, still on the web, called Parallel Sovereignty for Israel and Palestine, Beyond the Onion of Blame. Stop peeling away the layers of blame and let's create some kind of futuristic thing where we have the same country, but we call it by two different names and we share power and so on. The thing is, today, realistically, people who are realistic students of what's going on say that after all the killing and bloodshed and trauma, there isn't any way today that Israelis and Palestinians could share one state. That would be like a bridge too far. There would have to be a process where eventually, if we had a two-state solution that was feasible, where Gazans and West Bank people had a secure overland connection to get back and forth and all kinds of stuff like that, and without Israel stealing too much of the land of the West Bank in the final determination and so on, that eventually we could aspire to a confederation that could segue maybe into one state eventually. And I think a process like that is a very realistic approach. Might be a very long process, but you need leadership that's not just interested in retaining power, which is what, we've got an administration just like you've got in the States, where their primary concern about everything is how to retain power. And the people are getting screwed, So I don't know where that leadership is going to come from. Historically, in this country, the best people go to the voluntary sector. They run nonprofits and do all the work that government ought to be doing, with their nonprofits. And there are some brilliant people there. And none of them want to go into politics. Can you blame them? So I don't know what the answer is. But it's good to have hope. It's good not to give up hope. It's good to listen to people sometimes that have hope. Somebody like Mamdani who says, we can do this, you know. I love that guy. My family in the States can't stand him because they feel he's anti-Israel. And I just think that's a premature conclusion, but I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. With people like you guys hacking away on your anti-racism thing, I have hope. I'm not giving up hope. Jack, rescue me here.
Well, there is something, Deb, that's been preying on my mind. Every time we turn around, we hear another story about how Israelis are mistreating Palestinians. Gangs of settlers raiding their villages, burning down their mosques, cutting down their olive trees, shooting them, beating them, with the army standing by or the police standing by and not intervening, and nothing being done to bring them to justice. And of course, there's the murder of 100,000 Palestinians in Gaza. I mean, it's just, it's the most awful spectacle. It's made me ashamed to be a Jew. I don't understand it. Norman Finkelstein, whose name you may recognize as a well-known gadfly, had a recent interview that's on YouTube. I don't offhand have the citation. But he said, Israel is not a Jewish state because the way Israelis behave, Jews don't behave that way. And I feel that way. What is going on? And is there any hope for Israel to rejoin a community of nations of good, well-intentioned people?
I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I mean, the cadre of available political leadership that thinks it has a chance to replace Netanyahu in the next election, those people are not much better. They maybe wouldn't be inclined to make common cause with the Hamas far right, okay? But I don't know. One of the strange things in Israel is that senior military leadership has for years, for decades, been trying to persuade the political leadership that there is no viable military solution to this conflict. That the only viable solution to this conflict is a diplomatic political understanding, an agreement, an accord. Okay. And the most senior military people with all the experience and also from the Secret Service, the Shin Bet and all that, have said that. It's not any kind of a secret, you know? So where is the leadership, young or otherwise, that has the vision and the determination and the smarts to take the reins of government and make those kinds of things happen? I don't know. I tell you where a lot of the talent is located. It's located in the Palestinian Israeli community. Okay, because when you watch those medical shows like The Good Doctor or The Residents or whatever, those things, and whenever you have minorities or women, they're always agreeing with each other how they had to work twice as hard or 10 times as hard to get where they are, okay, and not to doubt themselves because they know how good they are. Well, the same thing is true in Israel. A lot of the Palestinian citizens of Israel, especially the young people, they have to work 5 times as hard to get hired or whatever. There's a lot of work being done by nonprofits to try to change that. You know, I translate some of that stuff, so I know about it, and it's very heartening. But nevertheless, you're starting from, way behind if you're not Jewish in this country. And so there's a lot of talent there that's not being fully utilized. And Palestinian youngsters go to university, they shine, they get degrees, they write dissertations, but they're underutilized in high tech and certainly in government because every government, with maybe the exception of one administration of a decade or two ago, refused to allow any Arabs in the actual government coalition. They would do deals and try to get the support of Arab parties or majority Arab parties from the opposition benches, but they wouldn't let them in the government. So if you're not going to let people into the game, you know, how are Arab young people, especially, how are they supposed to participate in self government if they're not ever allowed in the game? I don't know the answer, but I think it's unsustainable because of how, like what you said, it makes you ashamed to be a Jew. It makes me ashamed to be a human being. It's unsustainable. This degree of dystopia is unsustainable. And when I look around, I think, if we don't figure it out pretty soon, somebody's going to do a nuclear thing. Somebody with a suitcase bomb or something. It's such a small land area, it doesn't make sense for the enemies of the out of control, undemocratic Israeli regime or state. It doesn't make sense to try to do a nuclear or biological weapon because it will harm tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Palestinians along with the Jews. But the crazy people who dream such dreams don't take that into account. And I honestly feel like if you stay here, you have to recognize that there is a distinct possibility that one day you might wake up as, Hiroshima or Nagasaki. I mean, it could happen, you know? Not a very heartening prospect, but sometimes the darkest hours are just before the dawn. So we don't know what's around the next corner. And maybe somebody will figure out a way to pull it off, to put it back on track somehow here to a better place. I don't know. It's hard for me at my age. It's like I don't want to work that hard anymore, But maybe the young people will do it. It's possible. It could happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered the question. I hope so.
Okay. I and Eric have our hands raised. So I kind of in response to what you were just saying, it seems like the situation, and it has seemed for quite a while, that it's partly understandable, but in many countries where there's a very disadvantaged population, how do you get to some kind of respect from the majority and get relatively equal rights and so forth? There's always a struggle, and so often groups that are feeling oppressed feel they just got to pick up arms and struggle, or others use that. But I've been waiting for in the case of Israel and Palestine there for to have a movement like Dr. King led, where you have a nonviolent resistance, and it's basically building on a moral cause for equality and trying to get people of goodwill from all sides to get behind that. Then I haven't seen that come forward, but I'm just wondering if you on the ground have seen any little kindlings of such a thing as an alternative.
Absolutely. It's been tried. Every imaginable strategy, including nonviolence, Dr. King style and Gandhi style, it's all been tried. There was a guy called Mubarak Awad about 30 years ago, at least, who he was Palestinian, but he was in the diaspora, and he came to the West Bank or to Jerusalem or Ramallah, tried to start a movement for nonviolent opposition to the inequality with like a tax strike, like withholding your taxes in the good old Jane Fonda, Joan Baez tradition or whatever. And they had that guy deported so fast. Israel had that guy deported so fast that he like disappeared in a puff of smoke. His son today is actually involved in some really creative peace-seeking thing. I can't remember what he's doing now, but it's the second generation of the Awad family already. Is Israeli? You can just probably ask AI. Tell me about instances of attempts to organize nonviolent resistance to oppression on the part of Palestinians in Israel or Palestinians on the West Bank, and you've got a bunch of references. The data is there. It's been tried. It's all forms of that kind of what do you want to call it, struggle, have been very effectively quashed here. All the things that could have led to something better, have just been quashed. I some of it is the race memory of the Holocaust. The underlying, you know what I mean? The underlying, what do you want to call it? The base tone of, of Israeli Jews are not anxious to share control over their own fate with anyone. And that's been a tenet. And the education system is completely, the public schools completely taken over in the last 10, 15 years by this right-wing ideology, and they won't let so-called radical leftist groups, come and talk to students and stuff. It's because once you're brainwashing the kids in public school, you're in a bad, you're getting to a bad place. I mean, well, I don't know. But yet, okay, like for example, I have a friend whose father started loved tennis and came here from England and started building tennis courts in poor communities, outlying communities, including Arab communities, and created a foundation. And he's gone to a better world, but his daughter is running it today. She's about my age, I would guess. It's called the Freddie Criven Foundation, and they are still bringing Jewish and Arab kids in a very deprived area for these Jisr Zarqa in the area of Zichron Yaakov, which is a well-to-do Jewish area on the coast. There's still now, through everything, through October 7th and the war and all these tens of thousands of dead Gazan women and children, they're still teaching these kids tennis, training Palestinians in the program to be coaches and competitive tennis players. They have an after-school program where the kids come together and do homework and get enrichment. The families come together, okay, and they're still slogging away at it. You have a lot of that in the voluntary sector around the country in different places. There's even, how many people have heard of Neve Shalom? Neve Shalom Wahadas Salam. Okay, there is one village or small town in Israel that was established in the 1970s, where originally as an interfaith community, but segued quickly into sort of binational, multicultural interfaith community, where Israeli Jews and Palestinian citizens of Israel live together in the same community on purpose and raise their kids together in a bilingual, multinational kind of school. They have kids bust in from other towns also that come there to school. It's called Neve Shalom, or the Oasis of Peace. The American Friends, it's called the American Friends of the Oasis of Peace, and you can go to their website, just Google it. Still going on today. Umpteen years later, they're still living together. They have community meetings, self-governing community meetings once a week or however, whenever, like kibbutzim do, where they hammer out their issues, and it's like the little dot in the, what do you call that, Jack? The Zen Buddhist circle, with the white and the black. What's that called? You know what I'm talking about, right?
The Tao Te Ching symbol.
Yeah, and in the
yang.
black area there's a dot of white, and in the white area there's a dot of black, because it's the seeds of the cycle. That's a continuing cycle. They segue back and forth. So Neve Shalom, the Oasis of Peace village, is the dot, the dot of light in the darkness here. They've been living together on purpose for decades, and they're still doing it no matter what, and proving that it can be done. But they're not even a tiny minority. They're less than a speck. It's only like what, 50 families or something, 40 families. But they prove it can be done, and they have very serious issues to hash out, like the predominance of the Hebrew language. No matter what they try to do, They never get equality for Arabic. The Jews there don't learn enough Arabic. The teachers in the classroom, the Jewish teachers that want to be hired there have a preferential hiring if they know Arabic, but there still aren't enough of them. And the kids in the classrooms in that bicultural, dual language environment, they see the dynamic between the teacher's this Arabic speaker, and the teacher who's a Hebrew speaker, and that most of the time Hebrew wins. And so they're even their own kids that they're trying to raise in a more equal way see what the power dynamic is in the larger society as it affects them. And so, and these are very, to the people living there, these are very, like fundamental issues. And they're still hammering away at them, trying to figure out how to make it better. It can be done, but you have to want to do it.
Rachel? There.
I've heard of another organization that was working on kind of getting people together it's called the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability of Bethlehem University. Have you heard of that?
Is that Mazen Kumzia? Is the director Mazen Kumzia?
Yes.
So Mazen Kumzia is a fabulous guy. He's very politically extreme. He's like, he'll dialogue with somebody like me, but he doesn't really believe in it. Okay. He's very hardcore. Let's put it that way. But he's a very righteous, upright guy with integrity who has built largely with his own and his wife's money, amazing stuff there with like a botanical garden and bio education for kids, tours for school children, museum, all kinds of stuff. I used to get all his mailings all the time, and after a while, you need a rest from some of the intensity. So I kind of, let it go by. But yeah, they do great things. That's in the West Bank. I mean, you have to understand that's not inside Israel.
Right. It's safe. It's a safer place for them.
Safe. Well, yeah. Hopefully.
He came and spoke with his wife at my church in Eastern Massachusetts, so Southeastern Mass.
He's a one-man phenomenon. He's amazing. Yep. I have nothing but respect for the guy. He's done on a shoestring. He's done amazing work.
Thank you.
Well, Deb, I want to thank you so much for staying up to 4:40 in the morning and for taking the trouble to be with us and share your views.
It's been very interesting. I knew it would be, and it was. I thank you all, really. It was an honor to talk with you.
Thank you.
And I think what you guys are doing with your own work is really, really important, so keep doing it.
So be well, my sister, and lots of love. And
same here. Take it easy.
And be well.
Good night, Deb.
We'll stay in touch.
Good night.
Okay, everybody, we're going to close down. We have Matthew has arranged a speaker for next month, January. It's going to be exciting. And I hope you all have a wonderful holiday and New Year's. And barring any further comment, I'm going to say good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, and thanks for coming.